World English News Headlines at 7 a.m. London time, September 18, 2025. Hello and very warm welcome at Amish Shackle 5858. I am Amish Shackle. Following news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian news channels and the news agencies. So please, let's go to the headlines.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Israel's intensifying its bombing of Gaza City after ordering the evacuation of nearly 1 million residents. Speaking to Al Jazeera, residents report explosions and the destruction of homes, as well as naval boats joining tanks and jets in Israel's assault. According to medical sources in Gaza, Israeli strikes have killed 37 Palestinians today, including 24 in Gaza City. Here's Mohammed Al-Bayari, who was displaced and sheltering in Gaza City, borrowed a cart from his neighbor to try and pack his belongings, is now preparing to flee the area with his family.
The camp is crowded with displaced people from all the families. For Beit Hanun, the camp, Jabalia, Beit Lahia, they all fled. They fled without preparation. The tents were burned. Most people just fled due to the strike on the bank. It threw us onto the ground. May God make things easier. Only God will help us in this situation.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived in court Tuesday to testify in his corruption trial. He's facing 3 corruption cases. Yesterday, he was questioned about changing the law on Israelis living abroad to accommodate the Israeli Hollywood mogul Arnon Milchan in exchange for gifts. Netanyahu.
Tonight there is breaking news just as we come on the air. There are reports coming in right now. 3 officers dead, several police officers shot. The images coming in right now. Police racing to the scene in York County, Pennsylvania. Law enforcement officials telling ABC News several officers were shot. But we're also learning about the suspect. Schools and residents told to shelter in place. The governor rushing to the scene and what we have just learned tonight. Also tonight, hear the major headline for the first time this year under pressure from President Trump. The Federal Reserve cutting a key interest rate by 0.25%. Citing a weakening jobs market in the U.S. It comes as President Trump is welcomed with royal fanfare in the U.K. They're hoping to make a deal on tariffs to help their own economy. Thousands protesting the president's arrival. Images of President Trump and Jeffrey Epstein projected onto Windsor Castle. Tonight, dramatic testimony on the Hill from the former head of the CDC, who was fired by RFK Jr. less than a month on the job. She says she was fired because she refused to sign off on new vaccine guidance without seeing data or the science to back it up. Tonight, there's news of the investigation, the alleged shooter in the Charlie Kirk killing, those final hours before he was taken into custody, and who it was who called police. Tonight, the tense moments between an air traffic controller and a passenger flight. Radio calls repeatedly warning the pilot to turn away from Air Force One.
Pay attention, get up behind that.
What happened next? Tonight, the famous singer and the disturbing discovery of a body found in the trunk of his car, now identified as a 15-year-old girl who'd been missing for more than a year. Tonight, FBI Director Kash Patel grilled over the Jeffrey Epstein files. Patel now saying he has never talked to President Trump about the Epstein files. The alarming scene tonight, the suspect ramming their car into the gate at the FBI in Pittsburgh. The scare in Boston tonight at Logan, the spark scene coming from an engine during takeoff. The incredible image showing a pod of killer whales sinking a boat. What's driving this? And tonight we're now tracking a tropical storm in the Atlantic.
State visit second to none.
The royal family woo President Donald Trump as King Charles praises the special relationship between the UK and the US.
Mr. President, from York to New York, from Birmingham, England to Birmingham, Alabama, we are uniting common language and shared heritage.
Well, the President prepares to head to Chequers this morning to meet the Prime Minister.
But could a press conference held by the 2 world leaders cause an embattled Sir Keir Starmer further issues?
Yes, from pomp and pageantry at Windsor Castle to politics at
the minister will meet the president here today to talk potentially very tricky.
Home Secretary accuses migrants of mocking British laws as she vows to appeal on migrants.
Late host Jimmy Kimmel's program is pulled from the airwaves.
Is it time to bring back stricter dress codes after this picture of a mayor wearing a Hawaiian shirt and shorts to a military event went viral? We'll be debating just that.
And in the sport, Liverpool get their customary injury time winner to beat Atletico Madrid in the Champions League last night, whilst Harry Kane scores 2 for Bayern Munich as they beat Chelsea in Germany. Not a great start for French Postecoglou as Forest lose to Swansea in the Carabao Cup, and in Tokyo, Jake Whiteman just misses out on gold in the World Athletics Championships.
Big contrasts across the UK today. A very wet day for some, a warm day for others. Temperatures likely to rise in the southeast for tomorrow, maybe up to 26 degrees Celsius. Find out all the details with me coming up shortly.
It's just gone 6 o'clock. I'm Stephen Dixon.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is TV News Breakfast.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, it's good to see you.
Where were you when... Today marks 1 week since Charlie Kirk was gruesomely assassinated. The nation still mourning. His family, his friends, his fans. Primetime had the privilege of sitting down with one of Charlie's closest friends, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance. It's his first interview since the assassination, and J.D. says he owes his job to Charlie. We flew out to Howell, Michigan, where the Vice President toured a metal manufacturing company with a group of Turning Point students. J.D., emotional, took us back to the moment when the White House found out Charlie was dead. Mr. Vice President, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, it's good to see you.
Where were you when you heard Charlie was shot?
So I was in my office in the West Wing. The Vice President actually has a couple of offices. There's the Executive Office building office and the West Wing office. I was in the West Wing, and I just finished a meeting with somebody. I'm not even sure who. And I looked at my phone, and there were a bunch of group chats, frankly, a lot of them that Charlie was in, where they said, "Charlie, praying for your brother, hope you're doing okay." And I opened up my door, and somebody said, "Charlie's been shot." And it kind of hit me like, oh my God, this is very real. This is very serious. And, you know, what happened over the next hour or so, I'm guessing, is, you know, we knew Charlie. It's called your body guy, your special assistant, the person who's always with you. And I had a very dear friend in the West Wing who knew Charlie's body guy. And so his name was Mikey, and he called Mike and said, "Hey, like, what's going on?" And what was really, I mean, obviously, you know, the news was discombobulated. No one knew what was actually happening. It was a very chaotic moment, but there was a brief period where we were getting good reports from the hospital. And I don't know how plugged in you were to that.
I heard those.
And so, I saw the initial video. I've only seen it that one time. I refuse to watch it again. I don't want to see that happen to my friend ever again.
अच्छा ब्रांड की जो श्रेडेड चीज है ना, जिसमें चेडर चीज और मोज़रेला का कॉम्बिनेशन.
Want to see that happen to my friend ever again. But I initially thought terrible news, and then I started to feel kind of hopeful. And then, of course, we got the news from Mike that Charlie had passed, probably about an hour before the rest of the world found out. And I was the first who walked into the Oval Office and said, "Mr. President, I'm sorry, but Charlie passed." And that was a very, very tough moment. Because Susie Wiles, the White House Chief of Staff, was in tears, and she doesn't show emotion. You know, she is even keel the whole way, and she was in tears. And I just gave Susie a hug, and I think all of us kind of lost it. And it felt like, you know, we were all mourning our friend before any of the politics or the thought about, you know, what a titan he was and how influential he was to the movement. How do we possibly replace him? We were all just sad because our friend had died, and we supported each other in that moment, as you do with your friends. But man, it was a bad day.
When you told the president Charlie was dead, how did he take it?
You know, the president is very stoic, but he was clearly upset. He just kind of went quiet and let it absorb a little bit, and then just shook his head and said, "Man, he was a good guy, and we really loved him." And that's exactly right. That was a good thing to say. And we all just kind of had that same realization that he was a good friend, that he really loved what we were trying to do. He was a great supporter of ours. And it was a great honor to have him both as a friend and as a supporter. And frankly, I mean, Jesse, I would not be the Vice President of the United States were it not for Charlie Kirk. Aside from Donald Trump, I can't think of a single person who deserves more credit, who advocated more for me, both in my Senate primary back in 2021, who advocated more for me to be the nominee as Vice President, who advocated more for us to get in there not just advocacy, but effective action and organization. I wouldn't be the vice president. I wouldn't have this job without Charlie Kirk. I'll never forget it.
Do you believe that people out in the country should watch the video? I know it's very hard to stomach.
Yeah.
Is it important for people to process it?
Look, I go back and forth on it. I mean, look, it's my friend, and it's incredibly gruesome. And what I...
On this Wednesday night, falling interest rates in both Canada and the U.S.
We will support economic growth while ensuring inflation remains well controlled.
What the moves signal and whether Canada's cost of borrowing could keep dropping. Cracking a 17-year-old cold case, how Quebec police solved the murder of a woman found in a burned-out home. Home, the U.S. president, and purpose.
But this is truly one of the highest honors of my life.
What's the point of Donald Trump's unprecedented second state visit to the UK? Plus, ICE split. The scoop on why one of Ben & Jerry's co-founders says he can't, in good conscience, stay with the company. Good evening for joining the for the growing. Bank of Canada ranked 25. The U.S. Federal Reserve is rated to on first grade on.
The job's so easy. Tim Macklem's job has been one of the most scrutinized in the country, but Wednesday, it got just a little easier. There was a clear consensus to lower the policy rate for the first time since March. That consensus based on a shrinking economy between April and June, persistently weak jobs numbers, and diminishing concerns over inflation, thanks in part to a recent move from Mark Carney. With the removal of most retaliatory tariffs by Canada, there's less upside risk to future inflation. That led the former central banker turned prime minister to take a victory lap.
One thing I know is that Canadian interest rates are much lower than American interest rates. They're lower because this country's fiscal situation is strong, because this government has a plan to grow this economy.
The Liberals' fiscal plan, which is set to feature a substantial deficit, will be tabled on November 4th. Key details on potential stimulus or help tariff-impacted sectors is of major interest to the central bank.
Today, the government unveils its 2035 climate target, aiming to bring down emissions by 62 to 70%.
This is a responsible target, backed by the science and built on proven technology.
Prosecutors downgrade and withdraw indecent assault charges against veteran pastor Al Jones. King stresses the agreement during a state banquet for Donald Trump.
And our AUKUS submarine partnership with Australia sets the benchmark for innovative and vital collaboration.
And Kmart found to have breached the Privacy Act by indiscriminately using facial recognition technology. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ros Childs. The government is aiming to reduce Australia's emissions by up to 70% by 2035 as the world strives to reach net zero by 2050. The target range has been recommended by the Climate Change Authority and is based on 2005 levels. The plan has several new measures, including $2 billion for the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. A new $5 billion net zero fund will be established within the National Reconstruction Fund to help industries decarbonise. $40 million will be set aside to speed up the rollout of curbside and fast electric vehicle charging. There'll be $85 million for frameworks to help households and businesses understand and improve their energy consumption, as well as $15 million for sports clubs. Thanks for tuning in
Night Watch on France 24. I'm Charlotte Hughes, and here are our main stories in this hour. As Israeli troops and tanks press deeper into Gaza City, scores of people flee with the IDF opening a new temporary evacuation route. International outcry over Israel's offensive continues to mount, this as the death toll in the war-torn enclave surpasses 65,000. Donald Trump is treated to a day of pomp and pageantry during his state visit to Britain. The US president joined King Charles for a lavish banquet at Windsor Castle. Meanwhile, crowds marched through central London, demonstrating against Trump's presence on British soil. And France is gearing up for a day of nationwide disruption as anger mounts over President Emmanuel Macron's budget policies. This as the country's new prime minister seeks to firm up support from the political spectrum for his 2026 expense.
On DW.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. The U.S. President has received a royal welcome at Windsor Castle near London. Donald Trump's second state visit has involved military ceremonies and a royal tour, including paying respects at the tomb of the late Queen Elizabeth II. Trump will get down to business on Thursday and talks with Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Israel's military says it has opened up a temporary corridor for Palestinians to leave Gaza City for 2 days. Traffic jams have formed as people flee south from Israel's advancing ground forces. The army claims that thousands of Hamas fighters are still there, but hundreds of thousands of civilians also remain. The U.S. Federal Reserve has announced a quarter-point interest rate cut, its first for this year. The Fed had kept the rate steady as it assessed the impacts of Donald Trump's tariff policies. It's now projecting 2 more cuts this year as concerns grow over the slowdown of the U.S. labor market. This is DW News from Berlin. You can find out more online at dw.com.
At CNN.Asia.
This is Asia Now.
Hello and good afternoon. It is 12 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 9:30 a.m. in New Delhi, 11 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Yasmin Yonkers at this hour. China pushes for global unity at its largest annual security gathering. The Defense Minister Dong Jun at the Xiangshan Forum in Beijing, calling for inclusive security partnerships in the region. Australia pledges up to 70% in emissions cuts by 2035. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese promises more financing to achieve net zero targets and to cut power bills. And the European Commission proposes sanctions on Israel, suspending parts of a key trade deal and targeting top ministers over its actions in Gaza and the worsening humanitarian crisis. Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Breakfast Today. The pageantry gives way to the politics on day 2 of President Trump's state visit. We'll be joined by the Chief Secretary to the Treasury to discuss what's on the agenda. It's Thursday, the 18th of September. President Trump hails the highest honour of his life at his second state banquet in Windsor Castle as the King closes in on Ukraine's defence as a joint endeavour.
Our countries are working together in support of crucial diplomatic efforts, not least of which, Mr. President, is your own personal commitment to finding solutions to some of the world's most intractable conflicts.
Beyond the battlements, protests raged against the splendour lavished on the US President, who will today travel to the Prime Minister's country residence for one-on-one talks. And we're live outside Chequers, bringing you any developments and that all-important news conference later today. Also ahead, Jimmy Kimmel is seen leaving the studio for the last time after the talk show host was taken off air for his comments on Charlie Kirk's assassination. And in sport, Virgil van Dijk scores a stoppage time winner as Liverpool kick off their Champions League campaign with a dramatic win against Atletico. President Trump has said...
Africa News. The news. Pretoria Zambia's High Court has denied an appeal from the family of the late Zambian President Edgar Lungu, who sought to have his remains buried in South Africa. The court has ruled that Lungu, who passed away in June at the age of 68 while receiving treatment in a South African hospital, must be let to rest in his home country of Zambia. This decision comes after Lungu's family expressed a strong desire to hold the funeral in South Africa, allegedly to prevent the current Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema, a political rival, from attending or speaking at the service. However, the court previously affirmed that the Zambian government holds the authority to organize the burial of a former president. As it stands, Lungu's body has been awaiting burial in a morgue in South Africa, but with the court's decision, arrangements are set to be made for the handover of his remains to the Zambian government.
Empty streets and shuttered shops. For the last 2 weeks, the city of Boya in southwest Cameroon has seen virtually no activity as separatist rebels announced a hard lockdown. The fight has prohibited movement, leading to a shortage of supplies for the city's residents. Schools too have not been allowed to reopen.
Education is a fundamental human right that needs to be respected. The lockdown has a very, very negative impact on our children. Still taking into consideration that others are in schools, other regions, but in our children are being kept home. If they go to school, the SAC, which is a non-state armed group, will come after our children. On the other hand, we have the government. We need protection. Our kids also need protection for them to be in class. We must advocate for the resumption of schools. School boys.
One of the major casualties of the conflict, which started in 2017.
Our counterparts in the Western region has an advantage over us because they are months ahead and we have limited time to cover. The same program is to educate with the public exams like GCA. You can exercise your duty as a teacher normally in this region because teachers are seen as a threat to these separatists.
Now calling for dialogue between the protagonists.
Live with about 4 children at home. Since 2016, we have been facing this lockdown, especially at the beginning of every school year. When others are in school, in other regions, they are at home. It affects their psychology. It affects how to request from our government is an inclusive dialogue.
The separatists have vowed to disrupt Cameroon's upcoming presidential election as well. Rights groups have both sides of committing atrocities.
Here in Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince, residents are hard at work cleaning up what's left of their homes. The area was seized by gangs around a year ago, but they suddenly left in recent weeks and told residents they could return. Some have seen their entire livelihoods destroyed. Others, meanwhile, did not avoid its return to capital by It's really serious. They took what they could and broke everything. What they couldn't take, they broke and left behind. Here's the oven, but they couldn't take it, so they took the motor. An estimated 90% of Port-au-Prince is now controlled by armed gangs, who've tightened their grip on Haiti since the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in 2021.
Breaking news tonight as we come on the air. 3 officers shot and killed, 2 others in critical condition in Pennsylvania. The suspect allegedly opening fire just as police were serving a warrant. At least 5 officers shot in the line of duty. Helicopters airlifting those injured to area hospitals. The new details just in. And breaking right now, ABC is pulling Jimmy Kimmel Live indefinitely following his remarks after Charlie Kirk's death. What we're learning. Also tonight, the former CDC director's urgent warning saying America's public health system is headed to a very dangerous place. Telling senators she believes RFK Jr. fired her because she refused to sign off on new vaccine recommendations before seeing the evidence, something he denies. Pomp and pageantry oversees King Charles rolling out the red carpet for President Trump with a carriage procession, colorful flyovers, and a lavish banquet as protests against the visit shut down central London. The body discovered inside a car belonging to singer David, identified as a 15-year-old girl who had gone missing. The chilling new details just coming in. Balls of fire exploding out of a plane engine. The pilot forced to abort takeoff at Boston's Logan Airport. What happened next? And the cream of the crop, you'll meet the youngest farmer in the U.S., who at just 10 years old is already being offered a full ride to college. How she's planting her own path for a bright future. Plus, the Fed cuts interest rates. What it all means for the cost of your house, car, and credit cards. Top Story starts right now. Good evening. I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Ahmed Abbas. On the News Hour tonight, the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates amid pressure from the president as economy uncertain.
The United Kingdom honors President with a lavish state visit amid a tense time for foreign relations.
And a panel commissioned by the United States determines Israel is committing genocide as it escalates and a ceasefire remains elusive.
Virtually the entire community of international human rights lawyers, we've never seen a consensus as clear as this one, and now this additional report on top of that.
Breaking news, 5 police officers shot in Pennsylvania. We have the latest from the scene.
There were 5 law enforcement officers who were shot today. 3 fatally.
President Trump is greeted with pageantry and protests in the United Kingdom. Eye on America, an enduring friendship forged in agreeing to completely disagree over politics.
Thank you for watching Ahmed Shakil 5858. I am Ahmed Shakil. I hope you will visit again. Have a good life. Bye-bye.